Welcome, heroes and villains, to Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel. This is Fjook's table, as you can tell by the title of this video, and I'm your titular host Fjook. With me today, I have two GMs who met through an RPG, and that is what we're going to be talking about. Those two GMs happen to be both members of Citadel Angel, but I'm sure they can probably introduce themselves much better than I can.
So I am Josh Wallace. I am the keeper of the keys to Angel Citadel. You can find us on angelcitadel.com, Twitter at Josh Wallace, and Twitch, Angel Citadel Play, YouTube, Facebook, MeWe, whatever. We're everywhere. It's like having multiple personalities.
I'm Joanne Wallace, the angel of Angel Citadel, and like you said, you can find us all over the internet.
As I just mentioned, this isn't an interview. I didn't give you any questions to prepare because they're basically all off the top of my head. But this is about how you two met. And if I and from what I heard in the fireside chat, you met through ad on Reddit.
We did indeed. It was about 8-9 years ago, something like that.
Something like that.
I was looking to get back into role playing. I'd been away for 5-6 years maybe, and my drug of choice at the time was Shadowrun, and so I was looking for an online game because I didn't know anybody where I was living, and my family was very much a fantasy role playing group. They were D&D, not anything else, and I needed some crime fix, and so I started looking around for ways to find an online game, and I happened to be big into Reddit at the time, and there's a subreddit called LFG, looking for games, and so I went on there, and there was a post by someone named Katrilla that she wanted to run a game, or they wanted to run a game. I didn't know it was she at the time, and they were looking for players, and so I said, sure, I'll play, and that's how it started. That's how we met initially.
So were there a lot of applicants for that game that you had to sift through?
472. So just a few.
How did you decide which ones were going to be in the game?
Well, for the most part, the first 5 got my attention. My original goal had been for 6. For the 6th person, Josh was actually number 5. The 6th person got a questionnaire sent to them that they needed to answer because a couple of people that were invited were promptly removed because they decided to be inappropriate. This was back at this time. Women in gaming wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
So what was this Shadowrun game exactly?
Well, all right. To answer that question, I've got to give you some background about Shadowrun. Because I don't know how many people that watch your show are going to know about Shadowrun. Shadowrun isn't a campaign game like Dungeons and Dragons is. It's very much a series of one shots where you use the same character over and over to try and accomplish runs. while being criminals. And the game that I was running at the time was basically a long standing campaign where they needed to locate and defeat a set of primordial gods.
Yeah, we swung for the stars.
Only instead of defeating it, our friend who was playing a character named Mojo decided that he would become her high priest.
Despite my best efforts to stop it.
That brings up a question. Do you still play with the other players of this game?
Yes. Well, when he can, we play. Our last game together was Numenera. We played Numenera together. It was quite interesting.
So, what was everyone playing?
In Shadowrun, I was the GM, which meant I got to play all the NPCs. Josh was playing a gunslinger named Chromed Edge, and a friend of ours named Todd started playing a character named Hawk. And then the other friend named Jay started playing Mojo, which was a voodoo mage from New Orleans.
What about that game made you realize that you should play more games together?
He discovered he liked the way I told stories and focused more on telling the story rather than just what the dice fell out.
And I liked that she didn't ever tell me no. Like, you run into a bunch of DMs or GMs that you try and say, okay, I want to try this, and they'll try and come up with a reason in the rules that you can't do that sort of thing. And she never told me no. You can really try anything you want, and so I did, and it made for some really, really fun situations. In fact, that game was the very first time that I ended up introducing romance into the game, and it kind of pissed her off.
That was not okay.
Yeah, it was. That was pretty awesome, quite frankly.
All right.
Could you explain how you introduced romance into the game and why it pissed off the GM?
So, in order to understand this, you have to kind of understand how Shadowrun works. Shadowrun is the mechanic of Shadowrun is a dice pool based system. Attributes and skills combined together tell you how many D6s you're going to roll, and a 5 or a 6 on a D6 is a success, and anything else is a failure. And if you roll a certain number of ones compared to your pool, it's a critical failure or whatever, right? Also, if you roll a 6, you can take that die and re-roll. They're called exploding 6s. So at the time, we were trying to recover the niece of a very wealthy hospital owner from the mansion of a vampire. And there are vampires in this game. And she hired some nobodies, us, because we were really, really low power at the time, to go in and take care of this. It turns out that this wealthy woman had a chief of security that was a bit put out that her boss would hire, these deniable assets, these shadow runners, to go do this job when she had a perfectly good security force that could do it for her. So she took it upon herself to bring the security force to do the same job that our little group of runners was doing at the same time. About 30 seconds in, we realized that we were way outgunned and way outclassed. And she already had a chip on her shoulder. And so my character, who was the Chromed Edge, was kind of the peacemaker of the group, the level head, okay, decided that rather than try and mix it up with this security group and then try and figure out how to get to this vampire and get the girl back, we were going to attempt to join forces. And my ability to negotiate sucked. I was a gunslinger. And I had one dice to throw. And so I threw one 6-sided die and rolled a 6. And then I picked it up again and I rolled another 6. And I picked it up again. How many did I roll on?
You kept exploding it, so you ended up rolling it 4 times.
She decided that, with that much exploding and that many successes, I managed to convince the head of security that we weren't all that bad of guys. And so we worked together and we rescued the niece and killed the vampire and all that jazz. And that was fine. And afterwards, as we're walking out, it occurs to me that, having a contact that's a head of security of a fairly affluent hospital that we could use maybe to, go patch up bullet wounds and stuff like that wouldn't be a bad thing to do. So I tried to make friends. And I rolled a 6. And then I rolled another one. I did that twice in one session. And over the course of the campaign, and this was 10, 11 months or something like that, that relationship turned into a romance. As part of me developing my contact and improving my connection with them and what they do for us, the kind of information they give to us, things like that, because that's what you do in Shadowrun. You rely on your contacts as much as you rely on your own skills. That relationship grew into something that was a lot closer than friends. And at the end of the campaign, they ended up married with kids. And in a later campaign, we actually played their kids. And their kids became Shadowrunners. So...
Are there any times when the other players did something like that?
You got to tell the Red Lobster story.
God. All right. The Red Lobster story. So, what you got to understand is one of the hazing rituals old Shadowrunners like to do with new Shadowrunners is give them strange and unique runs to do. There we go. So they decided that they would have one of the new players set up a heist to do a Red Lobster. Now, if you've played Shadowrun or most cyberpunk games, you know that as things progress, you don't always have really nice places to eat and to have food. And most food that you get is basically pudding or what's that stuff called?
Soy something or other.
Basically liquid tofu. It's not very appealing. So they decided that they were going to ransack a Red Lobster. And they all wore masks. Very much the departed president masks. I think you did what? Abraham Lincoln?
I did.
And Eli did Jefferson. And then James, which was the new player, did
Bush, I believe.
Bush.
And Mojo was Nixon.
And Mojo was Nixon. So you've got to understand something. Mojo, played by Jay, was very much the raging Cajun. He would randomly get upset. He was very much the voodoo, creepy witch doctor. So like even when he ended up taking his mask off, he was still creepy AF. Just did the whole white skull face paint, big earrings, whole 9 yards. Because one of his uncles was a voodoo. And during the course of the night, they decided they were going to ransack. Chromed Edge went to the men's room. And while he was gone, the sane one of the party left the party alone. Mojo leaps onto the table, rips his Nixon mask off, and ignites his hands with fire and screams, "Bring me all the cheesy biscuits or somebody gonna get hurt real bad." So of course the waitresses are freaking and bringing him cheesy biscuits, and he looks down and he looks at one of the waitresses and goes, "Is this all the cheesy biscuits?" And "Oh, we've got some in the freezer." "Bring them." And so they ended up leaving with like enough cheesy biscuits to feed them for like 6 months.
We had to steal a truck to carry them out.
So yes, Josh and Jay taught me the meaning of the word shenanigans.
Were there any NPCs that you thought would be a throwaway character that became a recurring character?
God, yes. All right. We had got our group had gotten reduced to 2. It was Josh and another guy. And so Josh was still playing Chromed Edge. Jay, the guy playing Mojo, had to take a break because he was in finals month. And anybody that's been going for a master's know what finals is like. So to help them out in the magic department, I made a DM NPC. This NPC they had met before, briefly, and basically helped out a little bit, usually with information, because in Shadowrun, your run is based on information. What you do, everything you do in the game, how well it runs is based on information. It's kind of like Call of Cthulhu in that way. So I introduced Pyro, and Pyro's helping out, and you know, her name was very much why she was helping out. She liked to set things on fire. However, her favorite thing to do was to make little plastic mannequins. And I'm sure people know what plastic is, but if you don't, in Shadowrun, plastic is explosives. It's like C22.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it's plastic explosives. And she put little detonators in the back of them and then dress these like they were little clay dolls and then send them trooping into buildings and blow them up.
She'd use magic to animate
The
little explosion-laden dolls to blow things up.
Because you couldn't use magic on the plastic itself, the plastique itself. You had to use it on something. And so she would dress the dolls. And then she would use her magic to animate the clothing to make the dolls walk because she thought it was hilarious and cute.
She was nuts.
Mojo Jay comes back about a month after his finals are over. He's ready to play again. He's all gung-ho. And they've had this girl running around with them. And the first thing Chromed Edge says is, "Thank God you're back and the crazy girl can go home."
This is where the narrator breaks into this story and says, the crazy girl did not go home.
Mojo fell absolutely in love with Pyro and insisted that she had to be kept, to the point of even buying her black roses that set themselves on fire.
It was horrible. They were absolutely out of control together. It was terrible.
Did everyone end up getting married in that game?
No, it was just the two of us. So he and Pyro ended up married at the end of the game, and Chromed Edge and her name was Samantha. Sam ended up married at the end of the game. And ironically, when I said we got to play their kids, so their kids and Pyro's and Mojo's kids were friends. And so we've got this sort of extended family thing going on. And so in our version of Shadowrun, this family is both really, really wealthy and has their fingers in all kinds of different pies. So they sort of pop up everywhere.
Don't forget, completely insane.
Only half of them.
So, but yes, Pyro was meant to be there for a short period of time, and she ended up sticking around and staying. And I'm going to be honest, yes, the romance between Sam and Chromed Edge was a surprise because I didn't really expect him to keep rolling sixes. The romance between Mojo and Pyro didn't come as much of a surprise, but it also tied into letting them retire from Shadowrunning. Because once you reach a certain point in Shadowrun, it's really impossible for you to do anything except be an overpowered god.
Is there anything else you would like to share about the Shadowrun game?
No, just remember, when you're playing a game like Shadowrun, there needs to be consequences for actions. Otherwise, things go sideways. One of the big mechanics that Shadowrun has that I wish other cyberpunk games have had that I haven't found yet is a concept called heat. Shadowrun had that, and basically it was heat and reputation. So basically, how well you were known by people and how well you were hunted by the cops, which made for interesting because they had to hunt. They decided they would start hunting Mojo because Mojo decided he was going to rob Red Lobster without a mask. and that led to them wanting to retire quickly.
Did Mojo become the high priestess of the godless?
Yes. All right, that's a different story, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it because you seem like you want to know. This was shortly after I had watched, was it the second one with Davy Jones?
Yes.
So I had watched Pirates of the Caribbean with Davy Jones because I had already, planned out a couple of different gods, and I decided that I was going to pull out the Haitian goddess, Calypso. And so one of the things that Calypso was known for is the ability to raise dead as zombies. So they needed to go to an island and figure out what was causing the raising of the dead and put a stop to it. And while they were there, Calypso started sending Mojo dreams and images using mirrors and magic. And then she presented him with a necklace.
And I couldn't stop him from putting it on.
And it wasn't even a nice necklace. It was one of those massive, gaudy monstrosities with the big and it just funked on his chest when he put it on. And yeah, it was not. And, because he became Calypso's high priest and decided he was going to go freer. So they hit the main encampment where she's being held captive. And then him and Pyro decide that they're going to blow up the building to ensure that the magical barrier break to release her. And bad things ensued.
Thank you for joining me at my table. May your schemes and rogues be plentiful and successful. And I kind of want to have Angel Citadel back to talk about the game that had these characters, the next generation, in it. But for now, I wish you a good day.
Thank you much. We appreciate it.
Happy to have come to visit, and we will be more than happy to come back.